What's up, everybody, and welcome into another edition of the Sit Down. As always, if you enjoy my videos, make sure you hit the like button every time you watch one. And so you don't miss one, make sure you hit the subscribe. We are back with another episode of Sit Down Shorts, and we got another great mafia story. Today, we're going to talk about the legendary, the long-standing story of Joe Old Man Paruta. Now, Paruta has been mentioned a few times in Mob Rat, Sammy Gravano's YouTube channel. And the legend of Paruta is long standing. He is a long time Gambino member. He's been around forever, and he has a fascinating story, one of which would garner his nickname. He was involved in many high-profile hits. We'll get to all that and more right now. Joe Paruta was born December 3rd, 1929 in Bensonhurst, Brooklyn. As we know, many mobsters have come from Benson. But in 1929, as we also know, the Great Depression had America in its grips. And for a family of three with two parents, it wasn't easy for the Paruta family, who hailed from Venice, to get by. In his early teens, Joe Paruta actually began to develop a premature aging, and in those times they didn't really know what it was. Years later, it was suspected that Joe Paruta had a syndrome called Werner syndrome. Werner syndrome causes premature aging. He had developed bird-like features. He kind of had a long face, a cough, kind of just looked like an old guy, even though he wasn't old. By 30, he looked like an old man. He had white hair and just kind of looked decrepit. But that didn't stop him from having a full life and getting into the world of OC. Coming up, he would actually be part of the Brooklyn crew of longtime Capo regime Salvatore Toddo Aurello. Aurello was actually from Manhattan, but he would move to Brooklyn and have a crew in the Gambino and Castellano families. Eventually, Toddo Aurello would step down, and Sammy the Bull Gravano would take over the Brooklyn crew. Now, they would work mainly out of a bar called Tally's, which was right in Brooklyn. And Gravano had a pretty trusted crew. It included Joe Paruta, Louis Molito, Mickey the Bat, Joey D'Angelo, Huck Carbonaro, and Nicky the Cowboy Mormondo. So Gravano's got this crew, and Peruta's his guy. I mean, he trusted and loved Paruta. He was Paruta a bit older than Sammy, and I think Sammy all kind of looked at him as his, obviously he looked at Toddo as kind of a surreptitious father, but he also looked at Paruta as well in that kind of light. I feel like Paruta would be regarded as a well-mannered guy. He was always cracking jokes and having a good time, and he would never display anger, really. It was said that he loved going to the track, and it was also mentioned that he would regularly go there with Frankie DeChico's father. There's also a pretty funny story that Gravano's actually told on his YouTube channel, that at Tally's bar one night, Paruta was in there eating with his family, and he had called beforehand and said, look, there were these ice cream treats that they made at Tally's, and Paruta loved them, according to people that knew him. And he called that night and said, look, I'm bringing my family in. I've told them all about these ice cream treats. I want you to have them there for me for dessert. Okay, no problem. Paruta comes in with his family. They have dinner. He instructs the waiter, hey, bring us out the ice cream. Waiter walks up. Mr. Paruta, they're gone. They're not here. We don't have any. Old man says, what do you mean? I called you. You said they would be good. He said, well, Huck Carbonara ate them. They're gone. Sammy Gravano would receive a call directly from a furious Joe Paruta. And Paruta actually would ask for approval to kill Huck Carbonara. Now, keep in mind, Huck was in the crew, and Sammy didn't know if he was joking or serious. And it was believed that Joe Paruta was very serious about killing Huck Carbonara over eating the ice cream treats. It's the kind of guy he was. He was a serious lunatic motherfucker. In 1985, as we know, Paul Castellano would be killed in front of Sparks Steakhouse. But there was also a story told that Joe Paruta was actually the original hitman. He was the original idea. The idea was no one really knew, especially Paul. They didn't know who Paruta was. And Paruta was involved with the planning where there was an idea where he would go to a restaurant that Paul liked going to, and Paruta would sit in the back of the restaurant, go to the bathroom, and then come out guns blazing like Godfather and kill Bellotti and Castellano. Now, ultimately, that never happened, and they settled on the Sparks idea a little bit easier. But Paruta was originally involved in that idea to take care of Paul Castellano. Would have been interesting. Wonder if he would have taken care of it. Obviously, Sparks worked out like a charm, but it had been interesting if old man Paruta was given the job. 1986 would be a pretty important year. In early that year, Joe Paruta had a long-time cough. It was starting to wane on him. But before that, a big issue that Paruta had was in 1982. One of the individuals in the crew, Stymie D'Angelo, got into a beef with a Colombo associate, and he was actually killed at Tally's bar. And Paruta took it hard, according to many. He stopped doing the things he enjoyed. D'Angelo was a good friend of his, and he would actually convey to Gravano that, now that D'Angelo's gone, I've lost a piece of me, basically, and just know that I'm always here for you until the day I die. And I think Gravano is the one person in his life that he actually always trusted and always felt like he was truly there for him. But from then on, it was never really the same for Paruta. In 1986, he'd be diagnosed with terminal lung cancer after he went to a cancer treatment center. And that would actually be where one of the dying wishes that Paruta had, he'd only be given a year to live. Paruta actually asked Gravano if he could be made. That was one of his wishes, to die a made man of the family. Through Gene Gotti, they got to John, and John actually wrote off on Paruta being a made man. So he would actually die as a made man, which we'll get to in a second. But this would not prevent Paruta from taking care of two big pieces of work for the Gambino crime family, particularly Sammy Gravano. Gravano actually started to get wind that Nicky the Cowboy Mormondo was off the deep end. He was suffering from drug addiction, and he was starting to get other individuals in the crew to do drugs as well, including Michael DeBat. They didn't think they could trust Mormondo. They felt like he was kind of a loose end. They would go pick Paruta up as Mormondo sat in the front seat. Paruta gets in and shoots Mormondo twice in the head. He would also be called on to take care of Robert D.B. DiBernardo. And as we know, DiBernardo was a big timer in the family. He was a union earner. He was big in porn. Sammy Gravano made the case that DB was talking subversive. And like in the Gotti film, he summons DB to a drywall facility that he owned. Paruta gets him a cup of coffee and shoots him in the head. So Paruta was taking care of a big piece of work. He was always a very trusted assassin. He was always a very trusted killer for not only the Gambinos, but Sammy Gravano as well. By the end of 1986, it was getting really bad for Joe Paruta. He was in a bedside manner, basically, and near death. And he would actually call on Gravano for one last favor. It was said that he actually asked to be killed by the family willingly. He had not wanted to suffer anymore, and would actually ask to be killed, a mercy killing. It was ultimately shot down by Gotti, but that was considered. They trusted and understood Joe Paruta that he wanted this. He didn't want to suffer anymore. It wouldn't matter, though. They actually had set a plan in motion, but it wouldn't matter. Gotti shut it down, and ultimately in October of 1986, Joe Paruta would pass away of terminal lung cancer at the young age of 57 years old. If we could see, Joe Paruta did not look, he looked 87, not 57. And again, that a lot had to do with his condition that he had or may have had. But it was the terminal lung cancer that would do Joe Paruta in. When we talk about assassins and killers in the mob, we'll never talk about Joe Paruta. But interestingly enough, for a long time, Joe Paruta was a very trusted assassin. He didn't talk much. He did what he had to do and took care of people with zeal. Joe Paruta, a name that if you know about the Gambinos, you may not know, but now you do. Definitely had a legend behind his name. As always, like I said, if you appreciate this video, please make sure you hit the like button. It does a long way for this channel. Make sure you hit the subscribe. We continue to gain more and more subscribers, and I couldn't thank you enough for that. make sure you hit that button before you get on out of here. As always, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time here on the Sit Down.